Welcome to Paranormal Pages. Let's get straight into the true scary stories. Story 1. The Forbidden Gaze. The sea was an endless, dark abyss, its waves crashing against the rocky shores with a fury that mirrored the storm brewing in the sky. My name is Isaac Hale, and I had been the lighthouse keeper on Blackstone Isle for the past 5 years. The isolation suited me, no one around to judge or question my past. It was just me, the lighthouse, and the ever-watchful eye of the sea. Old Tom, the previous keeper, had been adamant about one thing: never look directly into the light, he warned. It's a curse, that light. A portal to the other side. The souls of the drowned, they stare back if you do. At first, I thought he was just an old man spouting superstitions, a relic of a bygone era clinging to ghost stories. But there was something in his eyes, a haunted look that made me pause. As weeks turned into months, the routine became my solace. The light was my duty, my responsibility. It kept sailors safe, guiding them away from the treacherous rocks that claimed so many lives. But there were nights, stormy nights like this one, when the air was thick with a strange energy. It was on such a night that my curiosity got the better of me. The wind howled outside, shaking the lighthouse to its very foundations. The walls groaned as if in pain, and the air was electric. My eyes kept drifting to the light, that powerful beam cutting through the darkness. It seemed to call to me, beckoning with an irresistible pull. My heart raced as I stepped closer, each footfall echoing in the hollow silence. The closer I got, the stronger the pull. The light was mesmerizing, almost hypnotic. Just one look, I thought. What harm could it do? As I stood before the lens, my hand reached out, trembling. My fingers brushed against the cool metal, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. I hesitated, old Tom's words echoing in my mind. But the urge was overwhelming. I leaned in, my eyes locking onto the light. For a moment, everything was silent. The world seemed to stand still. Then, the light flared, blinding me with a searing white glow. I gasped, staggering back, but it was too late. In that instant, I saw them, the faces. Pale, gaunt, eyes hollow with despair. Hundreds of them, all staring back at me from the depths of the light. I stumbled, my heart pounding in my chest. The faces seemed to scream silently, their mouths open in a chorus of agony. Among them, I recognized sailors, fishermen, even women and children. Their eyes bore into me, accusing, pleading. I couldn't breathe, couldn't look away. It felt like I was drowning in their sorrow, their pain. Then, as suddenly as it began, the vision vanished. The light returned to its normal, steady glow, and I collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath. The room was cold, the air thick with the scent of salt and something else, something rotten. I lay there, shaken, the faces etched into my mind. My thoughts raced, trying to make sense of what I had seen. Were they real? Ghosts? Spirits of the drowned? Or was it just my imagination, fueled by isolation and fear? I knew one thing for sure: the lighthouse was no ordinary beacon. It was a gateway, a bridge between our world and something far darker. And now, I had crossed that bridge. The line between the living and the dead had been blurred, and I was caught in the middle. Hey! Subscribe for more true scary stories. The days following that night were a blur of restless sleep and an ever-growing sense of dread. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that those faces from the light were still with me, lurking in the shadows. My nights were filled with nightmares of the drowned, their cold hands reaching out to drag me into the abyss. I tried to brush it off as fatigue, a trick of the mind, but deep down, I knew something had changed. The light had marked me, and there was no turning back. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of crimson and gold, I felt a presence in the room. It was subtle at first, a chill in the air, a whisper just beyond hearing. I froze, my eyes scanning the room, but nothing seemed out of place. Yet, the feeling persisted, growing stronger by the minute. My heart raced, the hair on my arms standing on end. I knew I wasn't alone. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice trembling. Silence answered, thick and heavy, pressing down on me. I turned slowly, every muscle tense, and there they were, those faces, ghostly apparitions shimmering in the dim light. They hovered around me, their eyes filled with a haunting sadness. One figure stepped forward, a young girl with long, tangled hair and hollow eyes. She reached out, her fingers translucent and cold. "Help us," she whispered, her voice barely audible. It was a plea, a desperate cry that sent a shiver down my spine. I recoiled, my mind racing. Help them? How could I help them? They were dead, trapped in some purgatorial limbo. The girl pointed to the lighthouse's spiral staircase, leading up to the lantern room. Her eyes locked onto mine, a silent command. My legs felt like lead, but I couldn't resist. I followed her, my steps echoing on the stone steps. As I ascended, the air grew colder, and the whispers intensified. They filled my ears, a cacophony of voices, each pleading for release. My mind struggled to comprehend the surreal nature of it all. What did they want? Why were they trapped here? At the top, the lantern room was eerily quiet. The light stood silent and unmoving, its glass lens glinting in the moonlight. The girl appeared beside me, her hand resting on the control panel. She looked at me with those sorrowful eyes and whispered, "Set us free." My hands trembled as I reached for the panel. The controls felt foreign, the levers and switches unfamiliar despite my years of service. The girl watched intently, her gaze unwavering. I hesitated, my mind racing. If I tampered with the light, would it release them or condemn them further? Was this some kind of trick? The voices grew louder, a chorus of anguish that drowned out my thoughts. I couldn't think, couldn't focus. My hand hovered over the main switch, my heart pounding. "Please," the girl begged, her voice breaking. Her desperation was palpable, a knife to my soul. I clenched my jaw, steeling myself. Whatever the outcome, I had to do something. With a deep breath, I pulled the lever. The light flickered, its beam dimming before flaring up with an intense, blinding glow. I shielded my eyes, the heat searing my skin. The voices crescendoed, a deafening wail that shook the very walls of the lighthouse. The air crackled with energy, and then, just as suddenly, it all stopped. The light returned to normal, steady and calm. The room was silent, the oppressive atmosphere lifted. The girl was gone, along with the other apparitions. I was alone, the room empty and cold. Had I done it? Had I freed them? I stumbled back, exhaustion washing over me. The lighthouse was still, the night outside eerily calm. I felt a pang of guilt, wondering if I had truly helped or simply unleashed something far worse. The image of the girl's pleading eyes haunted me, a constant reminder of the consequences of my actions. I knew one thing for certain, the lighthouse held more secrets than I could ever fathom, and I was now a part of its dark legacy. The following days were a maddening blend of paranoia and guilt. The storm had passed, leaving the sea deceptively calm, but I felt no relief. The eerie quietness of the lighthouse had a way of amplifying every creak, every gust of wind, turning them into ominous portents. The girl's face haunted my thoughts, her eyes imploring me to understand something far beyond my grasp. I tried to go about my duties, but the weight of what I had done, or thought I had done, was unbearable. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had crossed a line, disturbed a delicate balance. One morning, while sifting through the old keeper's logs, I stumbled upon something strange. A small, leather-bound journal tucked away at the back of the drawer. It was different from the official records, its pages yellowed and brittle. Curiosity piqued, I flipped it open, revealing a scrawl of handwritten notes. The entries were dated back decades, detailing the experiences of the lighthouse keepers before me. But one name stood out, Elias Grayson. He had been the keeper for over 30 years, his tenure ending abruptly under mysterious circumstances. Elias's entries were unsettling, filled with ramblings about the light and the spirits. He wrote about the whispers, the faces, and the overwhelming sense of being watched. It was all too familiar, echoing my own experiences. One entry caught my eye, dated the night before his disappearance. They come to me in the light, it read, the handwriting shaky. They demand release, but the cost is too great. The light is a beacon, a bridge between worlds. To tamper with it is to invite damnation. The words sent a chill down my spine. What had I done? Had I unleashed something that should have remained sealed? As I pondered the implications, a realization struck me. The light wasn't just a navigational aid, it was a prison, holding back the souls of the drowned. Elias had known, and now, so did I. My heart pounded as I flipped through the remaining pages, searching for answers. The final entry was a frantic scrawl, barely legible. The key lies in the basement, it read. The true source of the light's power. It must remain sealed. God help me, I cannot bear the burden any longer. The basement? I'd never ventured there, assuming it was just a storage area. But now, it seemed there was something far more sinister lurking below. I hesitated, the journal slipping from my grasp. The basement. A part of me wanted to run, to leave the island and never look back. But the other part, the part that couldn't ignore the girl's plea, pushed me to investigate. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the room. I grabbed a flashlight and made my way down the winding staircase, the air growing colder with each step. The door to the basement was old, the wood warped and splintered. It groaned in protest as I pushed it open, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and something else, a faint metallic tang. My flashlight beam cut through the gloom, revealing an array of old machinery, pipes, and cobwebs. At the far end of the room stood an ancient generator, its metal casing rusted and worn. It hummed softly, a low, ominous drone. I stepped closer, my breath visible in the cold air. The generator seemed to pulsate, the vibrations resonating through the floor. My gaze fell upon a small metal door at its base, half hidden behind a tangle of wires. I crouched down, prying the door open. Inside was a strange apparatus, a cylindrical device with a glass chamber at its center. It was filled with a murky, swirling liquid, the source of the metallic scent. My flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows across the walls. A plaque above the chamber read, "Containment Unit." My heart raced as I realized what this was, the true source of the lighthouse's power, the prison for the souls trapped within. The liquid inside bubbled ominously, as if alive. Elias's warning echoed in my mind. The light was a gateway, a bridge to the other side, and this device was the key. I stepped back, a wave of nausea washing over me. The enormity of the situation hit me like a tidal wave. The lighthouse wasn't just a beacon, it was a cursed relic, a vessel for the restless dead. And now, I was its keeper, bound to its dark purpose. As I stood there, the room seemed to close in on me, the whispers from the light growing louder. The containment unit's liquid churned violently, and I knew, with a sinking dread, that the barrier between worlds was weakening. The spirits were growing restless, and I was their unwilling warden. The night air was thick with anticipation as I ascended the lighthouse steps once more, my mind racing. The containment unit in the basement was failing, I could feel it. The boundaries between the living and the dead were eroding, and the spirits were desperate. I felt like a man walking towards his own execution, each step echoing with finality. I reached the lantern room, the great lens of the light looming before me. It was eerily calm, the beam steady and unwavering. But I knew the truth, the calm was a facade, a thin veneer over a seething mass of restless souls. I stood there, staring at the light, its brilliance almost blinding. The faces began to appear once more, pale and ghostly, their expressions twisted in anguish. The girl from before was among them, her eyes full of sorrow. "Why did you do this?" I whispered, my voice trembling. She looked at me, her gaze piercing. "We are bound to this place," she replied, her voice ethereal. "You have the power to free us, but the price is steep. The light requires a soul, a keeper, to maintain the balance." The weight of her words hit me like a punch to the gut. A keeper? Was that my fate, to be the next soul bound to this cursed place? The room seemed to warp around me, the walls pulsing with an unnatural energy. The air was thick with the stench of decay, and the whispers grew louder, filling my ears with their mournful wails. I felt a sudden surge of anger and fear. I hadn't asked for this, I was just a man doing his job. But now, it seemed, I was caught in the web of an ancient curse. The faces in the light were watching me, waiting for my decision. The girl reached out, her fingers brushing against mine. "Help us," she pleaded, her voice barely a whisper. "Release us from this torment." My mind raced, thoughts colliding in a chaotic storm. The light was both a beacon and a trap, holding these souls in a liminal state. If I could find a way to destroy the containment unit, perhaps I could free them all. But the price was my own soul. The realization settled over me like a shroud. The lighthouse required a guardian, someone to manage the delicate balance between worlds. Without a keeper, the spirits would be unleashed upon the living, a torrent of vengeful wraiths. My heart pounded in my chest, a drumbeat of impending doom. I couldn't let that happen. With a heavy heart, I turned away from the light and made my way back to the basement. The containment unit hummed ominously, its liquid contents churning like a stormy sea. My hands shook as I reached for the controls, the weight of my decision bearing down on me. The spirits' voices filled the room, a haunting chorus that reverberated through my bones. I knew what I had to do. I had to destroy the unit, but in doing so, I would seal my fate as the next guardian of the lighthouse. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the inevitable. As I reached for the final lever, the room suddenly plunged into darkness. The generator's hum ceased, and an eerie silence enveloped me. My heart raced as I fumbled for my flashlight, the beam cutting through the pitch-black void. The containment unit's liquid glowed faintly, casting a ghostly light. I hesitated, the weight of my decision crushing me. But then, I heard her voice, clear and resolute. "It's time," the girl whispered. I looked up, and there she was, her face illuminated by the pale glow. Her eyes held a mixture of sorrow and gratitude, and I knew what I had to do. With a final, resolute breath, I pulled the lever. The containment unit shuddered, its glass chamber cracking with a deafening sound. The liquid inside boiled violently, and the air filled with the acrid scent of burning metal. The room shook, the walls trembling as if the very fabric of reality was being torn apart. A blinding light erupted from the unit, and I felt a searing pain shoot through my body. The whispers turned into screams, a cacophony of voices that echoed in my mind. I collapsed to the floor, my vision fading. The last thing I saw was the girl, her face serene as she mouthed the words, "Thank you." As the light consumed me, I felt a strange sense of peace. The weight of the world lifted from my shoulders, and the whispers faded into silence. The faces in the light were gone, their souls finally free. I closed my eyes, accepting my fate. I was the new keeper of the lighthouse, the guardian of the gateway. My soul would be bound to this place, ensuring the balance was maintained. And as the darkness enveloped me, I knew that the curse would continue, waiting for the next unfortunate soul to take my place. Hey! Subscribe for more true scary stories. Story 2. The Haunted Typewriter. The old mansion had been in my family for generations, an imposing structure of stone and timber that loomed over the quiet countryside. I inherited it from my grandfather, who had spent his final years locked away in the study, obsessed with his writing. As a child, I had always been warned to stay out of that room, a decree I had never questioned. Now, as the new owner, I found myself irresistibly drawn to it. It started the first night I moved in. Exhausted from unpacking, I decided to explore the house. The halls were filled with shadows that seemed to dance and whisper, their voices just beyond the edge of comprehension. I reached the study, the door ajar as if inviting me in. The typewriter sat on the desk, a relic from another era, its keys gleaming dully in the dim light. A chill ran down my spine as I heard it, the unmistakable clacking of typewriter keys, rapid and insistent. I stepped into the room, my heart pounding. The noise stopped abruptly. The typewriter was still, a blank sheet of paper loaded in its carriage. I approached, my breath hitching, and saw it, my name, David, typed repeatedly across the page. I shivered and backed away, questioning my sanity. The following nights, the pattern repeated. Every evening, the typing would commence as soon as darkness fell. And each time I entered the study, the only thing on the paper was my name. It was as if the house itself was trying to tell me something, but what? I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, the sense that the walls had eyes. Desperate for answers, I delved into my grandfather's journals, hoping to uncover some clue. His writing grew increasingly frantic, filled with references to the voices and the shadows. One entry, dated a month before his death, chilled me to the bone. They are coming for me. The typewriter speaks their language. I must warn David. But the warning ended there, incomplete. Determined to confront whatever haunted this place, I stayed in the study one night, the old typewriter before me. Midnight struck, and the keys began their eerie dance. I watched, transfixed, as my name appeared over and over. Then, without warning, the typing ceased. Silence. I reached out, my fingers brushing the cold metal of the typewriter, and felt an icy grip on my shoulder. I spun around, heart racing, but saw nothing. Just shadows. But as I looked back at the typewriter, a new line of text appeared. Help me. My blood ran cold. Was it my grandfather reaching out from beyond the grave? Or something far more sinister? The air grew heavy, the room darker. I felt a presence, unseen but palpable, a weight pressing down on my chest. The typewriter's keys began to move again, slowly this time, spelling out a final message: leave before it's too late. Despite the ominous warning, I couldn't leave. Something in the house demanded my presence, a mystery that needed solving. I began to notice the changes around the mansion. Objects would move on their own, cold drafts would brush past me, and shadows grew darker and more sinister. I found myself waking up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, the sound of typewriter keys echoing in my mind. One evening, I decided to search the attic, a place I had always found unsettling. Dust-covered furniture and forgotten family heirlooms filled the space, their shapes barely discernible in the dim light. As I rummaged through an old trunk, I discovered a collection of letters, each written in my grandfather's hand. The letters detailed his research into the house's history, revealing a dark and twisted past. The mansion had once belonged to a reclusive writer named Edmund Blackwood, who had mysteriously vanished in the 1920s. Local legends claimed he had made a pact with otherworldly forces to gain inspiration for his writing. His typewriter, they said, had a life of its own, channeling the spirits of the damned. The letters painted a picture of a man driven mad by the voices that spoke through his writing, a fate my grandfather seemed to have shared. As I read the final letter, a realization struck me: Blackwood's spirit was still in the house, trapped and seeking release. The typewriter was his prison, a tool that connected our worlds. I felt a mix of fear and determination. I had to find a way to free him and end the haunting that plagued my family. That night, I set up cameras in the study, hoping to capture any supernatural activity. As midnight approached, the house grew eerily quiet. The cameras buzzed with static, the screens flickering. Then, the typing began. I watched in horrified fascination as the keys moved on their own, spelling out my name once again. The air grew colder, the shadows deeper. Suddenly, the cameras went dark. A cold wind swept through the room, extinguishing the candles. I was plunged into darkness, the only sound the relentless clacking of the typewriter. I felt a presence behind me, breathing down my neck. I turned slowly, my heart in my throat, and saw him, Edmund Blackwood, his ghostly form shimmering in the moonlight. "Help me," he whispered, his voice a tortured wail. "Release me from this torment." I swallowed hard, summoning my courage. "How?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Destroy the typewriter," he replied. "It binds me to this world." With shaking hands, I grabbed the typewriter, feeling the icy tendrils of Blackwood's spirit clinging to it. As I lifted it, a surge of energy coursed through me, almost knocking me off my feet. I struggled to the fireplace, my every step a battle against the invisible force trying to stop me. The typewriter hit the flames with a hiss, metal melting and warping. The room filled with a deafening scream, the walls shaking violently. Blackwood's ghost writhed in agony, his form disintegrating into nothingness. The last thing I saw before losing consciousness was the study exploding into a blinding light. When I awoke, the house was silent. The typewriter was gone, reduced to ashes. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of peace. But as I left the study, I couldn't shake the feeling that something still watched me from the shadows. In the days following the destruction of the typewriter, the mansion seemed to settle into an uneasy calm. I found myself hoping that the nightmare had ended, that Edmund Blackwood's spirit had been laid to rest. Yet, the sense of being watched persisted, and I couldn't ignore the unsettling feeling that lingered in every corner of the house. One night, I was jolted awake by a cold hand gripping my ankle. I bolted upright, but saw nothing in the dim light. My heart pounded in my chest as I scanned the room, finding only shadows. I convinced myself it was just a nightmare and tried to go back to sleep, but the unease grew stronger with each passing day. Determined to uncover the truth, I sought out local historian Mrs. Thompson, who had spent decades researching the mansion and its previous inhabitants. Her eyes widened when I mentioned Blackwood and the typewriter. "You must leave that place," she warned. "Blackwood's spirit is not the only one tied to that house." Her words chilled me to the bone. She explained that Blackwood had dabbled in dark rituals, opening a portal to another realm. When he disappeared, it wasn't just his spirit that was left behind, but something far more malevolent. This entity had attached itself to my family, feeding on our fear and despair. Armed with this new knowledge, I returned to the mansion, determined to confront whatever evil still lurked within its walls. I spent hours searching for any remaining traces of Blackwood's rituals, finally discovering a hidden compartment beneath the study floor. Inside, I found an ancient book, its pages filled with symbols and incantations in a language I couldn't understand. That night, the oppressive atmosphere in the house grew unbearable. The walls seemed to close in around me, the air thick with an unseen menace. I heard the whispering again, the voices growing louder and more insistent. My name, repeated over and over, as if called by countless unseen mouths. Desperation gripped me as I realized I had to act quickly. I pored over the book, hoping to find a way to banish the entity. The symbols swam before my eyes, incomprehensible and maddening. As I struggled to make sense of them, a sharp knock echoed through the house. The door to the study slowly creaked open, revealing a figure cloaked in darkness. It was not Blackwood, but something far more sinister. "David," it hissed, its voice a cacophony of tortured souls. "You cannot escape." Fear paralyzed me as the figure advanced, its eyes glowing with an unholy light. I knew I had to finish what I started, to end this curse once and for all. With trembling hands, I traced the symbols in the book, speaking the words aloud, hoping they held the power to banish the entity. The air crackled with energy, the room trembling as the entity screamed in fury. Shadows writhed and twisted, clawing at me, but I held firm. The symbols glowed with an eerie light, their power seeping into the very fabric of the house. The entity roared, a sound that shook me to my core, and then, with a final burst of light, it vanished. I collapsed to the floor, exhausted but victorious. The house was silent, the oppressive weight lifted. For the first time, I felt a sense of true peace. But as I caught my breath, I noticed something on the wall, a single word, scratched into the plaster: "Beware." In the wake of the confrontation, the mansion was eerily quiet. The oppressive atmosphere had lifted, yet the sense of unease lingered like a shadow in the back of my mind. The word "beware" etched into the plaster haunted my thoughts. I couldn't shake the feeling that the battle wasn't over, that something still lurked in the depths of the house, waiting. I spent the following days in a haze of anxiety, the word "beware" gnawing at my sanity. Determined to uncover any remaining secrets, I dove back into my grandfather's journals, seeking answers. Among his final entries, I found a passage that sent chills down my spine: "The darkness cannot be destroyed, only transferred. It moves from vessel to vessel, waiting for the next soul to claim." The implications were horrifying. Had I merely shifted the curse? Was I now the vessel for this malevolent force? The thought drove me to the brink of madness. Every shadow, every creak of the floorboards felt like the entity reaching out to reclaim its hold on me. Desperate for clarity, I sought out Mrs. Thompson once more, hoping her knowledge could provide a solution. She listened with a grave expression as I recounted the latest events. "You may have banished the entity temporarily," she said, "but such dark forces are resilient. They cling to life, feeding on fear and despair. You must find a way to sever its connection to this world permanently." Her words offered little comfort but reinforced my resolve. Returning to the mansion, I scoured every corner, searching for any remaining link to the dark forces. I spent hours in the study, the source of all my nightmares, and finally found a hidden compartment in the old desk. Inside was a small, ornate box, its surface covered in the same symbols from Blackwood's book. With trepidation, I opened the box. Inside was a pendant, a dark gemstone at its center, pulsating with an eerie light. The moment I touched it, a wave of darkness washed over me. Whispers filled my mind, the entity's voice echoing in my thoughts. It was the vessel, the key to its power. I had to destroy it. I rushed to the fireplace, my heart pounding. As I threw the pendant into the flames, the room erupted in chaos. Shadows writhed and screamed, the walls shaking as the entity fought to retain its hold. I chanted the incantations from the book, willing the darkness to be banished forever. The gemstone shattered in the flames, releasing a blinding light. The entity's screams reached a fever pitch, then abruptly ceased. The house fell silent, the oppressive weight lifting. I sank to my knees, tears streaming down my face. It was over. The curse was broken. But as the light faded, a chilling realization dawned on me. The house was too quiet. I rose to my feet, looking around. The study was pristine, untouched by the chaos that had just unfolded. The word "beware" was gone from the wall. It was as if the house had reset itself. A noise behind me made me turn. There, on the desk, was the typewriter, untouched and waiting. A sheet of paper lay in its carriage, my name typed repeatedly across the page. The last line was different: "Welcome home." The end. Subscribe for more true scary stories. Thanks for watching.